We like to believe that our homes are sanctuaries, built of solid wood, cold stone, and the warmth of shared memories. We trust the walls to keep the world out, and the locks to keep us safe within the boundaries of what we call reality. But reality is not a fortress. It is a thin, fraying fabric, stretched tight over an abyss we were never meant to see. Sometimes that fabric wears thin in the places we feel safest, creating a tear that bleeds into the gray. They call it 7 the 7 beyond, a distorted reflection of our world where color goes to die and the sun never rises. It is a dimension of echoes, a place where the architecture of our lives is reconstructed in shades of ash and rot. And sometimes, our technology, designed to connect us, accidentally tunes into the frequency of that nightmare. It happened on a Tuesday night, during that heavy liminal hour between midnight and dawn when the rest of the world feels like a ghost. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic humming of the refrigerator and the distant, muffled patter of rain against the window pane. I sat in the living room, the glow of my laptop the only thing anchoring me to the present moment. On the coffee table sat the baby monitor, its small screen casting a flickering blue light against the underside of my chin. My 6-month-old son, Leo, had been asleep for hours, and the monitor usually provided a comforting loop of white noise. But then, the white noise changed. It wasn't the usual soft hiss of static, but a rhythmic, wet sound, like someone dragging a heavy sponge across a pane of glass. I frowned, leaning closer to the device, adjusting the volume dial until the sound filled the quiet room. Beneath the scraping, I heard it, a low, melodic humming that didn't sound like a lullaby I had ever heard. It was a discordant tune, shifting between keys that felt physically uncomfortable to listen to, vibrating in the back of my teeth. I looked at the screen, but the night vision was grainy, showing only the familiar silhouette of the crib in the corner of the nursery. Leo seemed still, a small bundle of blankets in the center of the frame, but the humming was getting louder, more insistent. "Leo?" I whispered to the monitor, my voice cracking with a sudden, unexplainable spike of adrenaline. The humming stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavier than the one in the living room. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the device. Then, a voice came through the speaker, a voice that sounded like it was being filtered through a throat full of sand. It didn't speak a language I recognized, but the intent was clear. It was a guttural, beckoning rasp that made my skin crawl. I didn't wait. I stood up so fast my chair tumbled backward, the legs clattering against the hardwood floor. I sprinted toward the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The air in the hallway felt strangely thick, as if I were running through waist-deep water. Every step felt like a struggle against an invisible resistance, and the air grew colder with every inch I moved toward the nursery door. I burst into the room, my hand fumbling for the light switch, my breath coming in jagged gasps. The light flickered and died, a sharp pop of the bulb leaving me in a darkness that felt far too deep for a suburban home. I didn't need the light to see the crib. The moonlight should have been streaming through the window, but the glass was covered in a thick gray grime that hadn't been there an hour ago. I lunged for the crib, my hands reaching out to scoop up my son, but my fingers met nothing but cold, empty slats. The blankets were there, neatly folded, as if no one had ever been lying beneath them. Leo was gone. My lungs seized, a silent scream building in my chest, but as I turned to run back to the living room, my eyes caught the glow of the monitor I had left on the floor. The screen was still active, and what I saw stopped my heart. On the small glowing display, I could see the nursery, but it wasn't the room I was standing in. In the monitor, the room was a desaturated nightmare. The walls were peeling, the floorboards were warped and blackened, and a thick, gray fog curled around the legs of the crib. And in that version of the crib, Leo was there. He was lying on his back, his small chest rising and falling in a slow, unnatural rhythm. I looked at the empty crib in front of me, then back at the screen. I was looking at a point of overlap, a physical tear where my home had merged with 7 I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched the air above the empty crib. The space felt different, It wasn't air, but a cold, gelatinous membrane that vibrated against my skin. I realized then that I wasn't looking at a recording. I was looking through a window into the gray, and my son was on the other side of the glass. Fear is a powerful thing, but the instinct to protect a child is a force of nature. I didn't think about the consequences. I stepped forward, pushing my body against that invisible, freezing wall. The transition felt like being submerged in ice water. The sound of the rain vanished, replaced by a silence so absolute it felt like a physical weight on my eardrums. The smell hit me next, a cloying metallic scent of old blood and wet concrete. I opened my eyes and found myself standing in the decayed version of the nursery. The colors were gone. Everything was a shade of bruised purple or dull ashen gray. The air was filled with floating particles of soot that danced in the stagnant atmosphere. I turned toward the crib. Leo was still there, but he looked pale, his skin reflecting the ghastly gray light of this dead dimension. He was beginning to stir. I knew with a terrifying certainty that if he woke up here, he would be claimed by this place forever. In the legends of Seven Alam, those who stay too long lose the light in their souls. Their eyes turn into voids, bottomless pits of black ink that reflect nothing of the world they left behind. I reached into the crib, my hands shaking so violently I could barely grip his small frame. He felt heavy, as if the gravity of this dimension was trying to pull him down into the floor. As I lifted him, I heard the humming again. It wasn't coming from a monitor now. It was coming from the shadows in the corner of the room. A figure began to emerge from the darkness. A tall, spindly thing with limbs that were too long and joints that bent at impossible angles. It had no face, only a smooth expanse of gray skin that rippled as if something were moving beneath the surface. It drifted toward me, its movements fluid and silent, like a shark moving through deep water. I clutched Leo to my chest, his warmth the only thing reminding me that I was still alive. "He doesn't belong to you," I whispered, though my voice sounded hollow and distant in the oppressive silence. The creature stopped, tilting its head, and for a moment, the humming turned into a sound like grinding teeth. I didn't wait for it to reach us. I turned and ran toward the spot where I had crossed the veil, praying that the door was still open. The air felt like it was thickening, turning into a solid wall of resistance. Behind me, I could hear the wet, dragging sound of the creature's footsteps, closing the gap with terrifying speed. Leo's eyes began to flicker. I saw his eyelashes tremble, and I knew I was seconds away from losing him to the black. "Stay asleep, Leo. Please, just stay asleep," I sobbed, throwing my entire weight against the invisible boundary between worlds. For a second, I thought I was stuck, that the gray had swallowed us both. Then, the world shattered. I felt a violent jolt, a sensation of being pulled through a narrow straw, and suddenly I was falling. I hit the hardwood floor of the real nursery with a bone-jarring thud. The lights flickered back on, the yellow glow of the lamp feeling like a warm embrace. I looked down at the bundle in my arms. Leo was awake now, his big blue eyes wide with confusion, reflecting the light of the room. They weren't black. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air, tears streaming down my face as I held him so tight he let out a small, indignant whimper. The room was normal again, the smell of rain returned, and the grime on the windows was gone. But as I looked over at the baby monitor on the floor, my blood turned to ice. The screen was still on, showing the empty, decayed crib in the gray. And standing right in front of the camera, staring directly into the lens, was the faceless thing. It wasn't moving. It was just watching. I reached out and smashed the monitor with the heel of my palm, breaking the screen into 1,000 jagged pieces. But even in the silence that followed, I could still hear the faint melodic humming. It wasn't coming from a speaker anymore. It was coming from the vents. It was coming from the walls. We moved out the next day, leaving everything behind. But sometimes, when the house is too quiet, I see a flicker of gray in the corner of my eye. I know now that the veil is thin, and once you've crossed it, the other side never really stops looking for you.